remember looking down and my kneecap was like, this is a real fucking problem. And I remember having this like moment of clarity in my life and realizing that nobody's going to fucking save me. No trainer's going to give me any information. No doctor's going to provide me anything. That if this gets fixed, it's going to be because of sheer will and me figuring it the fuck out.
You're listening to Barbell Logic, brought to you by Barbell Logic Online Coaching, where each week we take a systematic walk through strength training and the refining power of voluntary hardship.
Welcome to the Barbell Logic Podcast. I'm Scott Hambrick, and that's Matt Reynolds over there, and that over there is Mr. John Welbourn. We got a new guest with us today, and we've already been talking. I don't know. We've been talking for 35 minutes.
It's always the best. Always the pre-show is always someone where all the solid gold comes out.
Yeah, the post-show is the one for us where I'm like, you turn on that record and the podcast guests, they just freak out. They freeze up. And the second you stop recording, they tell you the three best stories they've ever. So we've learned you've got to just keep recording after you tell them that you're done recording. So they'll keep doing this. So you and I have known each other for a while, and I did the Power Athlete podcast that you guys have. You guys have been doing that for several years, and we came down to Southern California to train. My wife and I came and trained at your place in Southern California, and then you set it up and moved from Southern California to Austin. Yeah, because you're trying to turn Texas into California. That's what we heard.
Yeah.
And, so for people who don't know, I actually, first off, I think this is awesome. I've never had a bigger spread on the athletic spectrum on the show than I currently have. With Welbourn on the far right end of the spectrum, guy was a outstanding NFL offensive lineman. He's like 6'6", and you were over 300 pounds when you played. And then on the far left end of the spectrum, I have Scott Hambrick.
That's right.
And
16-inch,
like a 9-inch vertical.
16 inches.
16-inch vertical for Scott Hambrick.
It's true.
So Welbourn, for people who are not familiar with you, give us a little rundown. The other interesting thing about you is that you've done all these things. I'm interested to know, like I heard Joe Rogan talking the other day, and he said, I'll always be the fear factor guy. Like that's who I'll be. And so I guess my question for you is, you've done all these things, sort of like early paleo guy and all these other things with programming. And so tell us a quick rundown of your story, and then what do you think you're known for? Like, what do you think are the things that people remember you for the most?
All right, let me see where to start. I grew up in Southern California. I was the youngest of three boys. Played sports growing up. Wasn't necessarily that good at really anything. And then
that's bullshit.
Oh my God.
We're going to call bullshit first thing. It was really tough being an NFL star.
I got into martial arts pretty young. My older brother, I remember, got beat up once, or I think the way the story goes, my older brother got his ass kicked by some dude at school, and my dad wasn't much of a fighter. And so, straight up Karate Kid story. My dad takes my brother down to this like local like martial arts dojo. This guy in our neighborhood, this Japanese dude, had like a martial arts place. So he takes my brother down there. And about 3 weeks later, when my brother came home and started like punching and kicking all of my other brother and I, my dad just took all three of us. And I thought it was great. I asked my mom, I'm like, can I go every day? And back then it was like not like 1, 2. It was just basically you pay one fee and you show up as much as you can. So we would go twice a day or every day. And we would just do 2 classes because my mom would drop us off and she wasn't going to come back in an hour. So we just would stay for like 2 or 3 hours and do 2 classes and fuck around and train. And I got to be pretty proficient as a fighter. And at about 10 years old, I thought kicking was stupid. So I wanted to get into some more boxing stuff, but like the Y and some of that stuff was too far away. So I ended up training at this kickboxing academy. And I just wanted to box and get in the ring. And I did that for a bunch of years and, played basketball and baseball and, obviously other sports. And I was pretty tall, but pretty skinny. And my older brothers all lifted weights and they were all big football players. And I was like, man, when I go to high school, I want to play football, because my older brothers told me that all the cool kids play football in high school and I didn't want to be uncool. So I showed up to go play football, and all these kids that I went to school with that all played in all these Pop Warner teams and had won like national championships and were all pretty high level players. And like, I didn't even know how to fucking put my pads in my pants. And I remember the first day we go out there, these kids have been playing for years. They all knew a bunch of stuff. And I remember like the very first drill we had, I like kind of stood up, and I remember this dude came running at me, and I fucking punched him as hard as I could in the face. And he kind of like stumbled and went down, and I kind of like nervous and stopped, and the coach was like, "Great, that was awesome. Can you do it again?" And I was like, "Yeah, I think I can do it again."
It's my favorite thing to do.
Yeah, I was like, "This is what I've been good at." And I found all of a sudden, like, my brother Eddie had laughed at me for years, and he used to always like take like a pencil and he'd put like an orange on top and be like, "This is your neck. It's going to break. Like, is you fucking pencil neck." And so he used to make fun of me a bunch for it, which is funny because I worry now in society that, we can't really make fun of anybody. And I can think about the majority of things that pushed me had to do with one, shame, and my brother's making fun of me. Like, your neck is fucking skinny. You're a pretty fucking skinny kid. Go lift some weights and eat something. And being like, oh, instead of like kicking a can and crying in the corner, I was like, well, all those big dudes are in the weight room. So what if I just go hang out in there? I'll probably get stronger just through osmosis, right? And I went in and lift weights. I wasn't very strong that first day. I think I benched 115 pounds. And
it was like a freshman in high school. Yeah,
benched 115. I remember my working sets were at like 85. But a little bit of humiliation, all my buddies were at least benching through 135, and they didn't want to lift with me because they didn't want to take off the 45s. So I was like, okay. So my goal was to be able to bench 135 so I could train with my buddies. So I just maxed out every day, and like a week later, I was benching 135. Shocker. And I started eating, got bigger and stronger. I think I was 6 foot 165 as a freshman, and then the next year I was like 6'2", 200. I gained like 35 pounds, and then I just kept getting bigger, and it was amazing, which I know you guys are going to find this shocking. Every time I went in the weight room and I lifted weights, I got stronger. And the stronger I got, the better I played football, and the faster I got. And like, it's always like where these, I didn't see performance gains out of the weight room. And I'm like, man, the only place I really saw performance gains were in the weight room. Like, I would go in there and lift weights, and like I could go out and hit harder, and it was just kind of a 1-to-1. And I realized pretty quickly that like the more I do in here, the better I'm going to do out there.
Yeah.
Senior year, I went out and I got a whole bunch of scholarship offers. Actually, they started coming a couple years before that, and I went to UC Berkeley on scholarship. Played football for the Golden Bears.
Were you an offensive lineman in high school?
Yeah, I played offensive and defensive line.
Yeah, I figured you'd play both sides, but I wasn't sure. You weren't like tight end or anything. They weren't like, God, this guy's really tall and is pretty fast. Let's sit him out and just throw the ball up.
No, I played guard because we had an offense where I pulled on every play, and I was the fastest dude.
Yeah, that makes sense. God, I love pulling guards because you get to ear hole people. They don't know what's coming, right? And you're like, and just wham right in the side. I love it.
Oh yeah, it's really like we have a tagline here for my company, which comes from actually me.
Oh, I love it. I know it. Be the hammer, right?
Be the hammer, which was my analogy.
God, they're good Instagram posts.
As I was running as fast as I could, all I would think of is like, be the hammer. And I remember a few times I was the nail, and I actually remember every single one of those times. Yeah. So I played football at Cal, ended up graduating in 4 years and getting a degree in rhetoric, which was a letter in, or like a science of, was it the College of Letters and Sciences. So I got a degree in rhetoric, and then went on and did my master's work in my fifth year while I was playing when I was playing my fifth year in college. From there, I got drafted to go play for the Philadelphia Eagles. So I was the second pick in the fourth round. I think I was the 101st pick.
What was that like? What was that day like?
Pretty shitty.
You thought you were going to go earlier?
First day, yeah. So back then, it was like the draft started. It was a Saturday, Sunday deal, and they did the first 3 rounds on the first day, and then the other ones on the second day. And or I think it was maybe the draft started. It was 3 days and started on Friday. Maybe they did the first 3 rounds. Well, whatever it was, I had teams call me on the phone and said, "Hey, we're taking you with our second round pick. We're taking you with our third round pick." So all of a sudden, I'm fucking excited. And all of a sudden, you see like the New York Jets select this dude in the second round, and I'm like, okay. And then all of a sudden, this team selects somebody in the third round, and I'm like, fuck. So I don't get drafted that first day after I'd been told by a bunch of different teams that they were going to take me with either their second or third round pick. And I went to bed and was fucking pretty bummed. And then the phone rang at about 6:01 that next Saturday morning or whatever it was. And I heard it ring, and I was like, fuck this. And I didn't get up. And my brother's wife, who was there, and she actually got up. She's like, the phone's ringing, and got up and answered the phone because we were all up at my mom's house. And she answered the phone, and they were like, hey, we're calling for John Welbourn. He just got drafted. And so she yells at me. She's like, you got drafted. So I got up and I got the phone, and I'm talking to these people. No idea who drafted me. And I remember my brother turns on the TV and he's like, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I'm like, where the fuck is Philadelphia?
I was going to say, that's a long way from California.
Yeah, like I didn't really, I mean, I grew up in California. I mean, I'd been to the East Coast maybe once. Like, I didn't know.
And very gracious fans. Some of the most kind fans.
Some of the best.
You're like great.
So I get drafted by the Eagles. A week later, I'm out there, and I remember flying in and realizing, like, holy shit, I'm going to play football in Gotham City. And that was, and so I went to Philly. I came in, and I remember I came in pretty early, for mini camp, did okay. And then when I came back, they had actually cut all the old dudes in front of me, and I was the starter.
Wow.
So as a rookie, I was starting at right tackle. Came out in that first game of the season against the Arizona Cardinals. And I remember at the end of the first half, I stepped down. I was playing right tackle. The guy, I think it was Andre Wadsworth, like kind of threw me a head fake and tried to rip underneath. And I stepped down. And with my left foot, there was like a seam in the turf. And I remember my foot got kind of caught in the seam and the guy hit me. And I thought somebody fucking shot me from the third row because I heard this like explosion. And I remember all of a sudden I was on my ass, and I remember like looking down at my knee and like looking for blood, but realizing that like something was fucking wrong with my knee. And I actually ruptured my patellar tendon.
Oh, God. Was that in Philly?
Yeah, in Philly.
Yeah, because I forgot all about that, but they used to have like had a reputation for having this terrible field, right? Like,
it was like painted concrete, and there were these huge seams.
Yeah.
My foot got caught in the seam, and the dude hit me and loaded me, and something gave loose, and it was my patellar tendon, so I had a mid-patellar rupture.
So that was it for that season.
Yeah, so that was almost the end of my career.
Yeah.
They carted me off, cut my pants off, and I remember my left knee, I remember looking down, and my kneecap was like over to the right 3 inches and high 3 inches. And I remember thinking like, this is a real fucking problem.
It's not supposed to be there. Yeah.
No. And so they x-ray it, and the doctor comes in, and I'm laying there, and I remember my mom and dad came in, and my mom was holding my hand, my dad's standing there, and the doctor looks at me and he's like, you had a mid-patellar rupture. This is pretty devastating. We've never seen anybody come back to make it back from this one. So this is pretty much the end of your career. At least you got one start in.
Right.
So I ended up in surgery that night. I was 3 weeks in bed, 3 weeks before I could bend my knee. And it was pretty amazing because shit was fucked up. Like, it wasn't working. Sure. And I remember 3 months, I still couldn't lift my leg. I couldn't get my quad to fire. It's like cold in Philly, and like, I can't bend my knee. I can't walk. I can't do anything. It just wouldn't work. And I remember having this like moment of clarity in my life and realizing that nobody's going to fucking save me. No trainer's going to give me any information. No doctor's going to provide me anything. That if this gets fixed, it's going to be because of sheer will and me figuring it the fuck out. Because nobody was giving me anything. I'd go to the orthopedist. I went here, I went there, and like they told me, they were like, when you rupture the patellar tendon and you rupture and tear that retinaculum, you sever the nerves. So the nerves were torn. We don't know how long it takes for the nerves to heal up.
Yeah.
So the doctor, I remember the orthopedist was just like, they'll start firing when they want to fire. And I remember thinking like, this is all you fucking got for me? You're a doctor and this is all you're giving me. And at that point I reached out. I had always been pretty progressive in terms of my training and my diet. I mean, I remember in college, I was trying to bench 500 pounds, and, my roommate had the West Side Barbell videos, and I called Louis Simmons and talked to him about how to bench 500.
Yeah. I forgot. You're actually in the West Side versus the World video telling that story.
Yeah, true story.
And Louis answered. I did the same thing, and Louis answered the phone at that high-pitched voice of his.
Hey, this is Lou.
You're
what
like,
do you need?
Shit, I'm talking to Louis.
And I remember being like, is this Louis Simmons? Yeah. The guys from the video? Yeah. I want to bench 500. Well, here's what you need to do. And I remember he was telling me like, it was like, you got to get some 180s for floor press on the dumbbells. It was like dumbbell floor press for 180. Max effort was like just this whole fucking program, man. I wish I still had the paper. And I did it, and I ended up benching 500 pounds. Pretty easy. I'd squatted, I think, like 6'10" when I was 19. I benched 500 when I was 22. So I weighed.
But he was an average athlete, Scott.
Oh,
I was average.
I've been wanting to come back to that. You'll see like these supermodels. They'll go on like the Tonight Show, and they're like, "Oh no, I was really plain, and people made fun of me when I was in school." Bullshit. And then all of you guys are like, "Oh, I was an average athlete." Like Reynolds has been saying that on the podcast for 250 episodes. And then the other day, he actually told me, "Oh, I had a 30-inch vertical."
Yeah, I was, I verted
33, sorry.
Yeah, I verted 34 inches at 317 pounds.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But that's ridiculous. I had 33 at 165.
So why do these supermodels and you fucking guys like this, why do you guys always say that stuff?
So for me, I think what happened was I was always pretty fast and a decent athlete, and then I grew like 4 inches.
Well,
and all of a sudden, like I couldn't.
You didn't know where your foot was.
Yeah, like and I remember this is just kind of a funny story. Whenever people ask me, like, oh, like do you have any funny anecdotes? I'm like, let me tell you what happened. I remember I was in like 7th or 8th grade, and I grew a bunch, and I used to be fast, and all of a sudden, like everything was like all fucked up, and I remember we had to do these timed runs each week in 8th grade and like 7th and 8th grade. And then based on your time, you got a score. And that was how they scored us in PE. And I'd gone from getting A's and running fast to all of a sudden, like fucking deathly slow. And I remember telling my mom, I'm like, Mom, like I used to be fast. Now I'm slow. Something's wrong. And so my mom was like, oh, what do you think? I'm like, well, maybe I just need somebody to teach me how to run because I feel like I can't run anymore. So my mom asked my dad, and she's like, do you think we could get him a running coach? And my dad's like, I'm not fucking spending money on that shit. So I remember my mom being like, no, we're not going to help you out. You got to figure this shit out on your own. So I went to the teacher, and I was like, I can't go home with a bad grade. Like I can't go home with like a fucking C or a D in PE. And
by the way, can you imagine today actually grading kids in PE based on their agility?
So yeah, and so I was so humiliated that I was going to come home and have to, like, on my report card, have to show my mom that I got like a C or a D in PE because I was fucking slow on these runs. So I asked the teacher, I'm like, there's something I got to do, and she's like, well, if you want to come, we have makeup runs every Friday. If you want to come run extra on Fridays, I'll average your score to give you more points for a higher score.
Run for some extra credit.
I would lie to my mom, like, hey, I got to study extra after school on Friday. So I would run an extra run. And so I ended up getting, like, because I ran all these extra runs, I got more points. So I could get a fucking A in PE. And I just remember thinking about kids now being like 12 or 13 years old and like lying to your mom so you could go do extra runs because you were too embarrassed to come home with a fucking bad grade in PE.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when I went to high school, I played football, obviously, and I like lifting weights. And I remember they approached me and like, hey, do you want to come do track? And I was like, yeah, I'd love to come and run the hurdles, and I'd love to sprint. And they were like, well, we want you to throw the shot. I'm like, well, I'll throw the shot, but do I get to train with the track team because I want to learn to run better. I want to be faster. And they said, yeah, you can come out. If you come out and throw the shot for us, you can train with the track team, and we'll teach you how to run. So I was like, perfect. So I went out and threw the shot, and just did it long enough so that they would, let me go out there. And then I would go out and I'd run the hurdles and do all the sprints and everything. And all of a sudden, man, I was fast. I think I ran like 5:03 electronic at the combine. I ran 4.9 at my combine.
At 317, 320.
Which was funny because I was supposed to weigh about 305, 306. And the guy's place I was training at, Tom Shaw down in Louisiana, scale was fucking broken. And so I was right on the money. I remember fucking like weighing in. I was rated like 307, 308, and I go step on the NFL scale, and I was fucking 10 pounds heavy. And I was like, motherfucker, Tom Shaw bought a fucking cheap scale.
Why is that? Why was that weight the target?
Yeah, why does that matter for an offensive lineman as opposed? I mean, I can see why it would for a wide receiver or somebody that has to be
so
fast.
Certain teams at the time, like the Denver Broncos and some of those other teams, like what they really wanted was guys, these kind of like 6'5", 305 pound white dudes who were smaller, more athletic, smarter, hard. And that was the demographic I fit into. And then there was these like Trey Thomas, Orlando Pace type of dudes who were like 6'7", 6'8", 340, 350 pounds.
Yeah. And
they were just these fucking monsters. And so I either fit into one of those, you fit into this one.
I get it.
And for me, I remember I fucking weighed on the scale, and I saw the Broncos offensive line coach, and he's like, too fucking big to play for me. I thought you were going to come in way lighter than this. And I was like, So I just kind of fucked it up. If I had come in 10 pounds lighter, I probably would have run faster, and I probably would have done better.
Yeah, you think that 10 pounds cost you bucks?
I think so. Maybe a little bit, but who knows? But then the interesting thing is I showed up and I started that first year. I mean, obviously they drafted me to start, and then I got hurt. And, after that injury, I really had to like take a step back and be like, man, if I got two things are true. If I want to play this game, I'm going to have to figure this shit out myself. If I don't want to play this game, I have to figure this shit out myself so I can go on and lead a normal life and not be hampered by these injuries. So I got hooked up as a rookie with a guy named Mauro De Pasquale. And Mauro did my first supplement deal. And I remember Mauro sent me his book, which was the anabolic diet. And, which was the first, Mauro was doing carb cycling 25 plus years ago. And Mauro did my first supplement deal, sent me all the diet and training. And I remember reading, because I had done a bunch of my nutrition work in college and actually wanted to do that for my major and did enough stuff to get a minor in it. And Mauro sends me this book and he sent me all this diet stuff. And it could not be more different than what I'd learned in school. Yeah. It's like saturated fat is not bad. It's, you need saturated fat for a healthy androgen profile. You can cycle carbs and, protein being the, obviously the most important macronutrient for body composition. And man, I remember having this kind of, I don't know, I like to call it an existential moment, but this moment where I took a step back and thought to myself, you know what, this happens to me periodically, where, somebody approaches me with something and you hear something and you kind of have this idea of being like everybody else. You're like, I'm good. Or you take the Bruce Lee and empty your cup and think, hey, this guy knows what he's fucking doing. Maybe I don't know everything. Let me humble myself and do what this guy says. And so I decided, you know what, this guy fucking knows what he's talking about. I'm going to humble myself. I'm just going to do exactly what he tells me.
And this is during the recovery, your rookie year. Still. Yeah. So how did you guys actually hook up? Did he reach out to you? Did you reach out to him?
No. So my agent knew Mauro.
Okay.
And hooked me up with him for a supplement deal. So he's like, hey, Mauro had a new supplement company. Yeah. And he was looking for some NFL players to sponsor. So he was like, hey, so my agent's like, hey, I got you this supplement deal. I want you to jump on the call and talk to this doctor. He's pretty sharp with diet and training and he knows a lot of shit. So we got on and we just started talking diet and training. And I was like, okay, you know what? This is pretty good stuff. And I remember when he sent me everything and I read his book, it was right before the season was going to start, training camp. And I was like, I'm not going to go make wholesale diet changes this close to season. I've gotten this far. I'm just going to keep with what I'm doing. And I got hurt and was like, fuck. All right. So I dug in. I had nothing to do. I couldn't get out of bed. I read his book. I read everything he sent me. And I remember we got on the phone and I was like, Doc, here's what I got to do, man. I got to remodel this thing, man. I got to put on muscle. I got to put on size. I got to get bigger and stronger. And I got to, make some big fucking changes. And so he ended up writing me a bunch of diet and was like, hey, this is what I want you to do for your training. And everything started going pretty well, but I still couldn't get my knee to come around. I just couldn't get my quad to fire. I couldn't get it to work. And he ended up plugging me in with Charles Poliquin. And I remember I talked to Poliquin on the phone, and all Poliquin talked to me about was all the drugs I wasn't taking. And, he's since passed away, so I'm sure I can say that now. I'm not talking shit on the man. I'm just telling you what our conversation was.
Sure.
And then I called Mauro back, and he was like, let me plug you with another guy. And then that's when I talked to Charlie Francis.
I had no idea. you had done that. God, I'm jealous because the other guys I've talked to, but I would have loved to have talked to Francis.
So Charlie was like, and we talked about the idea of hey, the only way you learn to run faster is by running fast. It just was a lot of good, but he really said, hey, you need to jump on and get into the EMS. So the electromuscle stimulation stuff, we've seen great results with this. And so he plugged me in and I ended up getting the unit, followed his program. And I'll tell you, about 3 or 4 weeks after doing the EMS protocols, all of a sudden, I remember I was doing a single leg press. We had this kind of laying down kind of single leg leg press deal that they used in rehab. And I remember I could use 3 plates, and all of a sudden I get in there and I'm hitting 3 plates, and I was like, put another one on. By the end of the workout, I basically was pushing the stack. And within 6, 7, 8 weeks, all of a sudden I was back to squatting and pulling and this. And next thing you know, at the end of 12 weeks, everything was fucking fine.
Yeah.
My leg was firing. I was here. I was all of a sudden shit, feeling hey, you know what? I can turn the corner on this. And I was fucking, dude, I was really big and strong. And I remember I stepped on the scale and I weighed 326. And I was fucking massive. I looked like a fucking big planet with little people orbiting me. And I remember we went out to OTAs and minicamp. And I remember I got in my stance for the first time and we were doing pass sets. And I remember just thinking fuck, man, I'm rusty or I'm slow. And I remember we went into some live drills, and man, I remember I sat back and this dude just fucking ran around me like I was standing still. And I had this interesting realization that shit, man, I might be too big or I'm not moving fast enough. So I remember I hit up Morrow, and I was like, Morrow, I think I'm too big. I need to lose weight. Like, I just can't move as fast at that body weight. And he said, slow down. Like, don't worry. Let's get you in shape. And I remember he altered my diet stuff, and I came back for training camp that second year, and I weighed like 306. I think I lost 20 pounds in that 6 weeks. I showed up and I was like 306, sub 10% body fat, still benching 500, and went in and started 16 games that next year, and then basically used what I did that first year and that remodeling effect of what I called, and all that training, nutrition, and everything that I kind of foundationally made in that first year allowed me to basically go and be successful for the next 10 years.
I want to know more about this EMS. Exactly how did you guys use that? And what
well, I was going to say, so it wasn't, what's amazing is you got all these people now at home that they've got all these TENS units, and they're like, that's what I'm doing. Like, no,
yeah,
you don't understand. Charlie Francis was lighting your ass up with that thing, right? Like, it was as high as you could shock it.
The analogy he gave me is that if you don't have like a scared feeling of sweat on your lip, like to the point where like, I don't know if I can add another, any amperage to this. Like, if I can't ramp up intensity to the point where like, holy shit, something's going to tear. And if you don't have like a bead of sweat on your upper lip is what he said. Like, and then the minute that you feel like, oh, okay, this is doable, then you kind of ramp it up. And you have to fucking chase the intensity. So
where did you place the electrodes on this thing? I'm so interested in this.
The electrodes were put in like always within the muscle insertions. So there was always like 2 pads on, basically the top, or like on your quad, for example.
Proximal quad and distal quad, yeah.
And then there was always a ground. And then we did kind of bilaterally trying to match contractions. But I think in my 4th year, we got a bod pod at the Eagles. And I think when I got tested, I was the only dude over 300 pounds that ever tested on 10% body fat.
That's insane.
I was 7.8, and I was 282 pounds of lean muscle, which the guy freaked out because they had never seen anybody even near 280 plus pounds. And so the diet stuff that we had done with Morrow in terms of like how to cycle the carbs, eating protein, saturated fat, just being smart with all that stuff, and then really just matching, calorie intake with energy expenditure, which for 20 years, man, I've been telling people, I'm like, the law of thermodynamics doesn't fucking get scuttled based upon, your desire to have magic foods.
Yeah.
And, I used to go get my BMR done regularly. I mean, I was pretty close on average, around 4,400 calories a day on my BMR. And I would just match, energy expenditure with energy, consumption, and weigh myself and fucking dial it in.
Yeah.
It just wasn't all that complicated.
And you were eating sort of paleo before there was any such thing as paleo, right? I mean, that's really what you were doing. Is you were just
if you read Morrow's book, man, it's basically. I remember when Rob Wolf approached me in 2009 about paleo diet. I'm like, you mean the way I've been eating for the last fucking
10 years? Yeah, right. Since 2000. Yeah,
and like the idea of like, yeah, I mean, shit. It just always. So I was pretty fortunate. Like, and I really wish I could stand here and say, hey, I'm the product of all this, but I think I'm just a fortunate kid that had a lot of just kind of unique things that happened to him. And that, when I was 14 years old and wanted to start lifting weights, there was an old power lifter in my neighborhood, a guy named George Zangus. And George started Marathon Nutrition, which he invented the super suits and the wraps, like the gold medal
suits.
Yeah.
That guy was on your street in your neighborhood or whatever?
Yeah, he lived around the corner from us.
That's amazing.
And he trained in his garage.
Yeah.
So he had a 3-car garage.
He's like, I made this super tight polyester suit. Check this thing out.
Yeah. And dude, fucking Fred Hatfield was his buddy. He had one of the very first reverse hypers, and George trained us in his garage.
That's insane. Yeah. Then you blow out your knee and you call up D. Pascal and Poliquin and Charlie Francis. You got like it's like the trinity of coaches coming out, which is crazy, right? So you read these stats of these guys in the NFL, like that. What's the average lifespan of somebody in the NFL? Like, it's super, super short, right? It's 4 years or less or whatever it is. And you played a decade, only you blew out your patella on the first game. Like, that's amazing. Like, that's incredible.
I took a helmet to the shin in my third year. Yeah, it was my 3rd year. I took a helmet to the shin, fucking another first game of the year. Obviously, first games of the year weren't helpful for me, but I played guard next to a guy named Trey Thomas, and I remember we were playing the Tennessee Titans first game of the year, and the dude who was playing the 3 technique was fucking wound up. And I remember we were running a little inside zone play, and I remember I came off and stabbed him and stood him up, And we'd done it a million times before. And like on that play, the tackle comes and takes over the down guy. I go up and fucking hit the backer. And so I stabbed him, waited a second, wait. And I came off and hit the backer. Trey got off late on the play. And I remember the three technique tackled the running back into the back of my fucking leg and broke my fibula clean in half. So they carted me off. They casted me 5 days, and I played 3 weeks later, and then ended up playing 17 weeks on a broken leg.
Yeah, it's crazy. Non-load bearing. You know, don't be a pussy, John.
Well, yeah, so they told me you don't need that bone to play football. It's only 12% load bearing. Yeah, you can do it.
It's not that much. You still got a perfectly good tibia.
Yeah. So like I've always, for some reason, I just figured if my body and like my ability would tell me when I couldn't do it. And what was weird is like, even though, I hurt myself or this, I could still play at a pretty high level until one day I just couldn't do it anymore, which was about 10 years in.
I was going to say it was about 08. When did you stop playing?
Yeah. So I got hurt in 08, came home and had surgery. And then I just officially retired in 09. Okay. I remember I was coming back to, I was rehabbing and talking to some teams. And really the big catalyst for me was Kyle Turley, who's one of my closest friends and a guy I played with. Kyle called me and he had a seizure at a bar. And they took him to the hospital, did a big scan, and found out he had early onset Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And at that point, I remember he called me and was telling me about it. And I was like, how long did you play? How many games did you play? And I realized I played longer and had more games started than him. And I was like, I think I'm good.
Turley Hambrick, I know you don't know this, was a motherfucking badass. He was one of the most terrifying guys in football. He was insane. He was basically like the Mike Tyson of the NFL. Like this motherfucker would bite your ear off if he got the opportunity to. And then like since then, when you've heard interviews post NFL, he seems like the nicest dude on earth. Like he's like this super kind teddy bear. And you're like, wait, you're the dude that like did all that crazy shit?
He's an intense dude, man. He just intensity, like, and matching intensity with probably one of the most freak athletes I've ever seen. Was so, and still to this day, so athletically gifted, could move so well and was so fast. Fuck, dude. If he hadn't hurt his back when he did, he'd probably be shit. I probably would have been in his Hall of Fame induction.
Yeah. So what was the transition like for you coming out of the NFL and into at that 08, 09? Those are like the CrossFit explosion years. Did you struggle with, football's kind of been my entire life, not just the past 10 years. So the past 10 years are the NFL, but like really the past like 18 years of high school, college, NFL, like the better part of 2 decades. And now that part of your life is over. And what's the transition like coming out of that and going into the next thing for you?
Man, I really wish I could say that there was some like master plan behind it, but there really wasn't. I remember I was, came home and had knee surgery. And I remember I'd always trained at Athletes Performance when I lived in California. So when I lived in Florida, I trained with a guy named Rafael Ruiz. And then when I went to Kansas City, I moved out to California and I used to go up to Athletes Performance. And Athletes Performance is up in Carson. And I lived in Orange County, which as the crow flies is only probably about 29 miles. But in California traffic, that could be like 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah.
And up to 405. So I used to drive up there every day to go train. And on the days where the traffic was too thick or I just didn't want to do it, I would just go to a gym down the street. And I remember I did a Google search and I found that there was a gym that had barbells and like Olympic plates up the street for me. And so I used to have to drive like 20 minutes to South County. And I was like, oh, fuck, dude, there's a Olympic lifting gym. And I had Olympic lifted all through college and also in the NFL. So I went up and it was a CrossFit gym. And so I go to this little hole in the wall and these fucking skinny dudes are, snatching poorly and cleaning fucking abortion style and, doing a bunch of fucking spastic shit on the pull-ups. And I was like, oh, all right, they seem like they're working hard.
Did you know what CrossFit even was at that point?
No, I had a buddy talk to me a little bit about it. And I didn't really know that much about it. And so one of the guys recommended that I go to one of the seminars and check it out. And I was like, sure. So I went online and I bought a fucking ticket. And they were like $1,000, and I was like, "Oh shit, these are kind of expensive." And even
and an NFL player for 10 years.
Yeah, like I'm like I don't know, like it just seemed like holy shit, like $1,000 to go to this thing. So I was like, "Oh fuck it, you know what? It's up in Monterey, I'll go." So I buy the ticket and go to Santa Cruz and showed up at this CrossFit gym just randomly to learn about it. And I thought it was a certification, so I showed up in like jeans and fucking basketball shoes and a t-shirt, not realizing that like we were gonna have to work out. Yeah. So I ended up working out in fucking jeans that first day and, listen to what the CrossFit people were talking about. And like, a lot of it made sense. A lot of it didn't. and it just sounded like more like just uneducated people making observations about shit that they didn't know about. But the one thing I was really unique about it was, yeah, I mean, like I'd never seen people get excited about like putting 135 on the bar. You know, it was just really kind of strange to me. But the one thing which was really exciting was one is the fact that they were so into this glycolytic capacity. And I had kind of always kind of subscribed to this idea of like, hey, if you have a big glycolytic engine, you can bang and fucking move a lot of heavy loads, you know, and have big capacity. Like you can really do a lot of things. And the increased glycolytic capacity piece was really what had kind of tweaked my mind. The idea of like, you know, like if you can create a bigger base of GPP, theoretically you should have a bigger platform to build upon, not realizing that that's incorrect. So I had kind of like taken a turn this way and I should have gone this way. And so I found myself at the CrossFit deal and started training at this CrossFit gym, which ended up, you know, the owner got excited and told CrossFit. And then that's when they asked me to do the CrossFit Games. And so that was in 2008. I got a phone call, you know, a week or two before this games and said, hey, you want to do the CrossFit Games? And I was like, sure. What's that? They told me, and I was like, great, I'll show up and fucking win that thing. So I went up there actually and competed in the CrossFit Games about
Was the first run at Castro's, was it the run through the mountains? And you're like, here's this offensive lineman.
Oh yeah. Well, and I was 308 pounds.
I know every time I see Sam Dancer now doing that, I think of you. When I see Sam Dancer try to, like, you know, like he's kind of he's not at all anywhere near your size, but he's big for
he's way
CrossFitter.
bigger. Yeah.
You know, he's way big. So the guy's still 75 pounds less than. So, and I think of him, and he's dying, right? He's real strong, and he deadlifts over 600 on ladders and stuff, which for a CrossFitter is strong. And every time I watch him sort of have to run through the mountains, I think about Welbourn. And was that 08?
Yeah, 08.
That you did it? Was that when Jillian did? Is that the year Jillian? Yeah. So, yeah, she's one of our coaches. So, yeah, she's great.
So, yeah, I did that, and then like a few days later, I left and went to go to training camp with the New England Patriots.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah. So I went to like 7 days later after the CrossFit Games, I went, and I'll tell you this, I was fucking tired in training camp. I was real fucking tired. And I realized I shouldn't have fucking done that. And my training was all fucked up. I was like, man, because I totally pivoted that last couple of weeks before the CrossFit Games to try to, increase my metabolic conditioning and learn fucking handstand push-ups and muscle-ups because I don't know what the fuck's coming. So all of a sudden, a week later, I go to training camp for the New England Patriots, and I remember I'm out there, and I'm like, "Fuck, my legs were tired." I was not yeah, I kind of fucked myself. And in that last preseason game, I remember I came off and I hit a guy, and when I loaded me, I kind of felt a crunch in my knee, and I actually chipped off a piece of bone, and on my kneecap, got pulled off and got stuck in the joint. And so I remember walking off and being like, oh, fuck, dude, something's stuck in my knee. And I remember like kicked my knee real hard and it kind of like popped out for a second. And I was like, oh, thank God. And that was the end of it. I came back after practice or after the game, I didn't say anything because I had started every NFL. I had been a starter my entire NFL career. I just figured like, oh shit, I'll make this team and I'll say something after the first game. And because like once you're on the roster for the first game, you're vested and you're guaranteed your money. So I was like, oh, fuck it. I'll just not say anything and we'll see how it goes. And about 3:58 on that day, that last day, I get a phone call from the Patriots like, hey, Coach Belichick wants to see you, which just means you're getting cut. And so they brought me in and said, hey, we're going to make some roster moves. We're going to cut you today, but we want to re-sign you tomorrow. And so I was like, okay. So I hung out for a day. They called me back. I went back in and they put me back through a physical. And at that point, they were like, your knee's fucked up. I was like, yeah. And they were like, why don't you say something? I'm like, well, I've never been cut before. And at that point, they were like, we can't re-sign you. And I was like, I understand. So I left and came home and had knee surgery. And so I was rehabbing on the couch. And then that's when, Glassman asked me about helping them develop their technology in terms of training athletes. And I thought, oh, you know what? This seems interesting. Let's give it a shot.
So did you officially at that point, in your brain, you're like, okay, I can retire now?
No.
Did you still think you were going to come back?
Yeah, I figured I would still continue to train and like see if like everything, like I continued to train. And even though we were doing the CrossFit football thing and this, like in the back of my mind, I was still training and I was running and I was waking up early and doing everything I needed to do to go play. It was just weird in that the things that had been easy before I couldn't do. I wasn't as fast. I didn't have as much push off. Like whatever happened in that surgery, really was debilitating. And I think the doctor was way too aggressive because there was so much scar tissue and bleeding from what he did. I had to go get a second surgery to clean all that shit out. Yeah. And then after that, I was fine. Yeah. So, and at that point, I was already, 2 years past. And so it was just one of those things where I was going out to train and like teams were calling and I knew I physically wasn't ready to go do what I needed to do and play at the level I was accustomed to.
Yeah, that's good. What was Belichick like? One of the more empathetic human beings you've ever met, or?
I loved him.
I love the guy.
I wish I got to play there for longer. You know what I like about him is you do your job, let me do my job, and we'll all win and get rings. Yeah. Trust me. Just fucking do what I tell you.
Yeah.
Like there was no...
Cut the sleeves off this hoodie, motherfucker.
Yeah, like it was...
wearing sleeves.
And the great part is the confidence, like sitting in the meeting and like Belichick's up there and you're looking around, and I had known Tom Brady for years before, but seeing Tom and Vrabel and all these dudes that all have fucking 4 or 5 rings apiece, and like them being all bought in and being like, shit, if I just do what I'm told and listen to this dude, we're all going to win a Super Bowl. I'm fucking in. But like, I don't need to have somebody give me a hand job. I don't need you to tell me you like me. I don't need like any of the other, emotional bullshit. You don't have to say hello to me. Just fucking tell me, point me in the right direction. Tell me we're going to win and lead me over the hill and we'll go fucking slay a lot of people and win some football games. Yeah. And that's what Belichick, that's what he does better than anything. Yeah. And I was stoked to be there.
That's cool. I love the guy. So take us through what you're doing now, how you transitioned over the last 10 years or so from starting with working with CrossFit into what you're doing with Power Athlete now, and what you're doing now. And like, fill us in on what's going on.
Yeah. So like I said, I worked with CrossFit for a number of years, and we taught a CrossFit football seminar, and I've taught hundreds, like 200, 300 seminars all across the globe, from the Arctic Circle to New Zealand and back on every continent. And was pretty amazing to be able to provide a free training program, push it out to the world, and then travel to all the places all over the world and actually put the people that were doing the training through seminars and have a control group, I guess you could say, of CrossFitters that were there as well. So like, imagine you put out a training program that's kind of predicated on this kind of fringy CrossFit stuff. And then you show up and there's 50 people in the gym and you're putting them through, not only just like basic barbell training movements, and you're really teaching them a strength conditioning seminar. And it all of a sudden becomes like dramatically like apparent who had been following my training and who was following CrossFit. Because the CrossFitters could do nothing of what we asked. They couldn't change direction. They couldn't sprint. Yeah. They couldn't fucking lift weights well. Like they couldn't lift weights heavy. They couldn't just the amount of injuries and shit that we saw in terms of sprinting, change of direction. They were just dramatically lacking in what I would call, basic athleticism. And really just teaching those seminars and seeing this week after week allowed me to really craft what you see in the foundation for Power Athlete. I mean, there was a lot of things that I've coined, which is one of my first ones that I ever, made a point to the guys to go, what do you think? And I'm like, man, the best trick the devil ever played was convincing the world that he didn't exist. You guys have heard that one there? Yeah. I'm like, the best trick that Greg Glassman ever played was convincing the world that work capacity and athleticism were the same thing. Because it wasn't the case. Just because you can go hard doesn't mean that you're athletic. Sure. And athleticism is this other really thing, like is very, very different.
It requires actual programming and periodization, right? It's like it's a big part of it.
And movement and feedback and
actual technique
and execution and mastery, and just fucking putting your head down sled dog style and dragging fucking to the ends of the earth doesn't do anything about athleticism.
Sure.
Everybody remembers the guy in high school. It's like, this guy worked so hard and he never got far. This other guy didn't seem to work so hard, but he was such a gifted athlete that he got to go play.
Yeah.
So it's just a really interesting observation in that piece. And then you start realizing that, what I was seeing in real time was the SAID principle. That specific adaptation imposed demand said if you ask somebody to do nothing but submaximal efforts for extended periods of time, you get a conversion of fast twitch muscle fibers to slow twitch muscle fibers, and just to be able to sustain this type of stuff.
Sure.
And then people are like, well, what about Rich Froning? And I'm like, you have to fucking throw out outliers. When you start putting millions of dollars out there, you're going to get fucking outliers that show up that prove the paradigm wrong. But let's look at the general curve.
Well, is Rich Froning actually training for the CrossFit Games with CrossFit?
Well, I would say he probably does do CrossFit by definition. He's probably doing increased work capacity at broad time multiple domains. But so I would say that, but I would definitely say that what we've seen with CrossFit is outliers that showed up that had maybe a specific, adaptation, maybe something genetically, like who knows, like he has the ability to suffer longer than other people. And the guy's able to move at a really fast rate continuously. So like the problem is what we do in our society, and we see this all too often, is we try to make observations and drive things based off of like
the freaks.
And it's like people wanting to talk to NFL strength coaches about training programs.
That's right. Every high school, all the high schools are like, oh, we're doing the Oklahoma program. We're doing the Nebraska program. I'm like, bro, those kids are 14 and some of them are prepubescent. They're not the Nebraska's football program. That's not this. It's crazy.
We see it even worse in the NFL teams. They ask, these guys want to do, like, what are the Philadelphia Eagles doing? I'm like, you realize, and I've told people this, I played with dudes that if you came in and they played nothing but the fucking snare drum for 10 minutes a day, they would get bigger and stronger.
Yeah, that's right. That's we've said for years, the worst strength coaches in the world train the best. Like, you can literally do anything with these athletes. Come in, kick everybody in the nuts 10 times. And they're still going to go out and they're going to win 12 games a year. That's what they're going to do because they're freaks.
Well, right? What they do is they succeed in spite. Like I remember when I came in as a rookie, we did it was all hammer strength. It was high intensity interval training, 1 set to failure with like a line of machines. So I fucking sit down and I was like, 1 set to failure, and there was probably 20 machines. I ran the ladder and the coach is like, "That's good." And I'm like, "Well, can I do it again?" Like, he's like, "Yeah." So we just came with fucking, I'd be like, "All right, we got 40 minutes. How many times can I get through this motherfucker 1 set to failure?" And I remember I hadn't lifted any barbells. I went back and I fucking benched and I had gotten stronger. And they were like, "See, it works." And I'm like, changing adaptation works for a time. But then I also realized that if I stayed there and I did that training program in the off season, I wouldn't have had an NFL job very long. So I left, went and did my own training, and basically would come back, and every year and they'd be like, "Oh, so-and-so made 100% of his workouts. You didn't come to one off season workout." And I'd be like, "Okay, great. We'll see what happens on the first day of training camp when we all show up for the conditioning test, or you want to do any physical testing." And I would come out and I'd win every conditioning test. I would win every fucking physical test, and I would come out and still be the starter on day one.
How many guys in the NFL were going outside for like private consultations and stuff like you? I mean, you've just listed like 14, consultants that you brought in to help you with your career. That's got to be unusual, isn't it?
You know what? I think there's two camps. There's guys that just plug in and they're so gifted that they just do what the coach tells them. And then there's people like me, probably, who are, Berkeley grads that realize, if I don't know everything, but if you give me an opportunity and you point me in the right direction, I'll be able to get a cursory knowledge of it to actually be able to have an intelligent discussion.
Sure.
And, when you start relying upon shrugging your shoulders and I don't know, or I don't get the answers I want, I'm going to go out and search for the answers. And if I ask you hey, how do I get stronger? How do I do this? How do I fix my knee? And you don't give me the answer, I'm not just going to go home and kick a rock home and be like, the box boy, like, "Ooh, not this again." I'm like, all right, I didn't get the answers I want. I'm going to go out and find people that have answers for me. And then I have to discern whether or not those answers are the ones I want, or, have to get rid of my confirmation bias. But I have to go out and try to find the smartest people in the world and let the smartest people in the world guide me, which is what I did.
Yeah, it's personal responsibility. Weird, right? It's weird. Like, you actually took responsibility for your shit.
Did you have to buck the system to do that, though? Like you said, they're like, "Oh, you missed every single off-season workout." You're having to buck the system, right?
Yeah. Well, here was the thing. They wouldn't give me an off-season workout bonus. So they didn't, in my original contract, they didn't give me an off-season workout bonus. And then when I went for my second contract, they still didn't give me an off-season workout bonus. And I tried to tell them, I'm like, "Hey man, if you give me an off-season workout bonus, I'd be more inclined to stay." And they were like, "Well, we know you're going to train hard." I'm like, "Well, this means I'm not going to train here."
Right.
And they were like, just being cheap asses. So, and then they would try to give me shit about it, and I'd be like, all right. So I remember when the Philadelphia Eagles moved out of Veterans Stadium and they built the NovaCare Center, which was their new training facility. They wanted to showcase it to the news, and they were going to bring this whole media thing in, and they wanted to have the weight room and this whole thing. And I remember getting a phone call from the head trainer, Rick Burkholder. And I'm like, "Hey Rick, what's happening?" He's like, "Hey man, we got this media day for the new NovaCare Center. It'd be really great if we could fly you back and you could do the training piece for the media.
Yeah, can you come and bench 500 for us for the cameras? Yeah.
No, because, I mean, I could do 10 pull-ups with 90 pounds between my waist. I could fucking, bench, shit, I was a 500-pound bencher, fucking 600-pound squatter for reps. I did 585 for a set of 8 on the RDLs. I was super strong, in good shape. I could run, do all these things. And I remember they called me up, they fly me back, and I did this like workout, this fake workout they put me through. It was like running on the woodway and pull-ups and all, this whole fucking circuit thing for the media. And, I get done and I was like, so you motherfuckers train here the whole off season. You got to fly me into town, even though I don't do any of this stuff to film your media shit. They were like, yeah. I'm like, okay, sounds good.
Yeah. How do they
give me that bonus? That's what you should have said.
How do they justify that though? They're like, okay, here's the guy that goes off the res. We got to call him in when we need to show somebody that's, trained.
Do you think it was actually confidence in there was this thing that like, hey man, we've got to give these off-season training bonuses to the guys that we think actually might just be done at the strip clubs in Miami all off-season. So to keep them here, it was more about curfew and like making sure that they didn't go off and like snort a bunch of cocaine out of hookers' asses. They knew you weren't going to do that. You're going to go train. It's like, yeah, he's good. He'll train.
That was exactly the reasoning. Yeah. I mean, what I found is if you're 6'6" and you're 300 pounds, if you want, and I was single, it's a lot easier to meet girls if you're 6'6", 300 pounds and 10% body fat than 6'6", 300 to 30% body fat.
That's also been my experience.
Yeah. I mean, it just,
when I'm 6'6" and 300 pounds.
For some reason, chicks like big dudes if they got muscles. And I figured that out, when I started lifting weights when I was 14. So I was like, you know what? Like I would rather, be in good shape and look the part and be able to kick ass.
Yeah. So let's promote what you're doing.
Oh, okay. So, like I said, we taught a ton of seminars for CrossFit, and about 2011, 2012, after realizing that, the relationship that I was in was pretty tumultuous, I launched Power Athlete, which was really my brand and has been like the brand of my company for the last, 7 years.
Have you been defending your brand?
I do defend my brand constantly.
That's a good idea here.
I defend my brand, but I think what you find in this world is that there are brand stewards. There's people that are stewards of your brand. There are people that are have come to you for like good reasons. There's not some nefarious fucking clandestine plan to erode you and to steal and this and this. And I think you have people that come to you that are honest, good people, and they obviously want to, I guess, have success themselves, but they've chosen your, I guess you could say, like your family, your brand, your crest, whatever it is, to really flourish underneath it. And I think that piece is important to have people that are that, because like if you're the only dude beating your war drum and the narrative just comes from me, that's why it's not called John Welbourn Fit. It's called fucking Power Athlete, right? Because that's what we do. We fucking make power athletes. And there's many coaches and we have people on the blog, and I make sure that like it's not my voice all the time and that it's coming from other people. And if I'm the only byproduct and I'm the best person that I ever develop, then effectively my brand has failed. That to me is by far the biggest source of pride, is when I can sit back and be impressed by the people that I've brought. It just makes me look better. And I think what happens is sometimes people, when they create something, have this idea that they're the only ones that understand the vision, and they have to be, the person at the forefront pushing it forward and, lead, follow, or get out of the way or I'm going to trample you. And there's this idea that, I might have a vision, I might be able to see the forest through the trees, but at the end of the day, like, people have to paddle, people have to row, and you can never be too sure of yourself. You always have to be able to pull in information and surround yourself with good people. And I think if you find top performers and people that are pushing and, and believe in your vision, I think you have to empower those people and bring them in and, allow them to, steward the ship a little bit, because, at the end of the day, like, it's not about me. And I think that's a really hard thing for people to kind of step away, that, something like a CrossFit is a classic example. It's about all these people. And even though Glassman talks about the community, at the end of the day, it's fucking about him. Yeah. It's about his ego. And, he's the only one that knows where it's going in this. And I think, like, if we're on a car trip and I'm the only one that knows where we're going, and everybody's fucking lost, we're probably lost.
Yeah. It's amazing that it's not all about me either evokes tremendous amounts of fear and anxiety in people, or freedom. It's one of the two, right?
Yeah.
And so for me to hear it's not all about me that's freedom. Like, hold on, you've got great people that are ambassadors for your brand so that it's not a cult of personality, so that if you die or something happens, like the thing carries on because it's not about me. Like, to me, there's freedom in that. Like, I'm not in bondage to my brand.
Sure.
And so, but boy, some people are. They can't seem to get out of it. They're like, well, this is about me. I need it to be about me.
Yeah. Well, but it's pretty interesting, man. Like, when you talk about success, and this is something I've really observed, is that the people that have not had success early, like had a ton of failures, and then something is successful later in life, don't always know how to deal with it, or also don't, have the humility of it. Like, I played in the NFL at the highest level. I had injuries, setbacks here. You think you're at the top of the world, you get kicked in the balls in this. And, the next time you do it, you realize that, it's a team effort, and I have to be extremely humble and never take myself too seriously. And the minute that, fucking ego starts to become a bigger factor than intelligence, like, it's funny. My dad passed away about 1.5 years ago. He got diagnosed with cancer right after Christmas and was gone end of February. And he was 80 years old. And what's amazing is I probably referred to something that we talked about, or like some observation or analogy or something that he made almost every single day of my life. And I remember he told me once when I was pretty young, he's like, he goes, you got to look out for ego. Ego's killed more people than cancer. Mm. And, and that idea of like pride in who you are, pride in the quality of your work, and, being able to do a good job and have people believe in you and support you and to be honest, and all those other things are just givens. But where ego gets so fucking dangerous is all of a sudden you start doing things that are to your detriment to fucking feed your ego. And so something I constantly think about is like, is ego driving this? Am I making the right decision based off of off the best decision for me, my family, and my company? Or am I doing something to feed the fucking spoiled child or, immature child in me that is my ego? Is this about me needing to succeed to prove something to myself? Or is this the fucking best way? Yeah. And it's something I think about all the time. And I never want to be in a situation where ego forces me, or I make a decision based off of, the egotistical, spoiled little brat inside of me, opposed from the clear-headed man that's trying to see through the fucking forest through the trees. And I think what happens to a lot of men and a lot of women too, I mean, people in general, is as they get more success and everything starts they get this cult of personality, and they get the emperor's new clothes, and all of a sudden they have yes man, and everybody tells them how fucking great they are. And they don't have people around them, who might, tell them the truth, or be like, I don't think that's right. And so what they do, or they have those people, what they do? I don't want to hear that shit. So they cut them out, and they just surround themselves with their own fucking, sycophants, and they end up in this echo chamber. And you don't have the failures, or you don't have the fucking ups and downs of the emotional intelligence to realize that I'm making decisions based off of fucking people stroking my ego and feeding my immature little fucking child inside me. Because I don't know that for you guys that are listening that have children, kids are extremely selfish, right? Like I want to have that popsicle. I'm going to eat that fucking popsicle. And you know what? I'm probably going to get my ass whooped, but I still want to eat that popsicle. And like, it's with my kids, right? Like they make decisions off of emotion. They're, and that's as they grow, they'll start to realize that's not the best way. But I think what happens, especially with men, and, I've done this, I've built this brand, I'm this fucking great person. Everybody tells me how fucking wonderful I am. I walk into gyms and like, my quotes are painted on the wall. And all of a sudden they start believing that shit. And they surround themselves with people that just continue to fucking feed that narrative and feed that spoiled child. And then they make decisions to the detriment of their company, or they do things that are viewed as irrational instead of sitting back and being very calculated and thinking, you know what? The world's going to fuck me. I don't need to help it at all. Let me be intelligent about this. So that's the way I think about it. I could be totally fucking wrong, and maybe those guys are way more successful than me and tell me I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. But for me personally, I never want to, allow my own ego to derail what I'm trying to do, which is really just battle the bullshit, man. And at all times, even though it's painful a lot, being able to admit when we're wrong and to always provide really good, accurate information, and really just go to battle with the bullshit, because there's so much bullshit in this fucking strength conditioning.
Yeah, it's good, dude. So how do they find you? Where do you want people to go?
Super easy to find. John Welbourn, at John Welbourn on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And then obviously Power Athlete. The URL for us is powerathletehq.com. We have all our training programs there. And then if you're looking for a little bit more John Welbourn type of humor, you can find me at Johnny Wad. So Johnny, JohnnieWod, Johnny Wad, which is just the training programs that I kind of put out, which is my alter ego and really just my ability to have fun and poke and just be funny and just kind of not take it too seriously.
That's good. Dude, thanks for doing the show. That's
great.
Got
any more soapboxes?
That's all we get to do. That's why we do it.
Scott, I feel like you didn't get a word in edgewise, and you're by far the the smartest one of the bunch.
Oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about
that's
that.
Definitely true.
Well, everybody, that's John Welbourn. He's down there helping keep Texas. Don't move to Texas and try to make it where you fled, you fuckers. Keep Texas. It's important.
Scott, where are you at?
I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yep. And I've been thinking about buying a piece of property in Texas, so when we have the Third Revolutionary War, I can get a Republic of Texas passport. But if Texas gets out, Oklahoma will be out the next legislative session. Like first order of business, they're going to call it to order, and we're out.
Right.
Well, there's another Barbell Logic podcast. Thank you so much, John Welbourn, for coming on here and regaling us with your stories. Fascinating stuff. Thank you very much. Go send us questions at questions@barbell-logic.com. Go follow John. He's at what?
JohnWelbourn.com.
There you go.
Do you put John Welbourn? I'm easy to find, man.
Yeah.
If you can't find me, you ain't looking.
Well, Google's getting ready to Google SWAT you. It may be tough. But, that's okay because they hate libertarians.
Following Power Athlete on Instagram is fun, too, because you get to see all the Be the Hammer posts. You guys do a couple of those a week. Those are my favorite Instagram posts of the week is the hashtag Be the Hammer. It's good stuff.
Yeah. Well, there's another show. We'll talk to you guys in a few days. Milton, shut up.